It has been a minute since we've had the chance to talk with our good friend, and he is by far the most podcasted on our show. Meathead Goldwyn with us today, and Meathead, always great to see you, and I'm looking forward to talking about some grilling, brother.
Yeah, good talking to you too. It's a little cold and nasty up where I am in the Chicago area, but it hasn't stopped me from firing up the grills and the smokers. I wish I was down there in the Tulsa area where it's a little warmer.
It's a slight bit warmer. I think we were sunny and 75 today. So,
oh geez, you got a spare bed?
Not at the moment. Hopefully, sometime soon, though. Now, Meathead, we always kind of talk seasonally about each month about different things that folks are going to be able to cook, and I know we've got St. Patrick's Day coming up pretty soon. It's hard to believe how fast the year's already going for us. But corned beef, I know we wanted to talk a little bit about corned beef and also pastrami. And first off, is there a right and wrong way to do corned beef?
Well, I don't like the terms wrong, because I like to say there should be no rules in the kitchen or the bedroom. But there's a better way to cook corned beef than most everybody does it. And I think if you listen carefully here, I can teach you how to make the best corned beef and cabbage that you've ever made. It's a really interesting, historically, it's interesting. It's associated with St. Patrick's Day, but traditionally in Ireland, they didn't make corned beef. They made corned pork. Beef was a bit of a rarity and a delicacy over there. Pork was quite common. And the term corned has nothing to do with corn itself. Corning is a somewhat archaic term for curing, which is another word for treating meat with salt heavily to preserve it. And it goes way back to before refrigeration was common. You slaughtered a steer or a pig, and you had to preserve that meat all through. And pig killing time was usually late in the fall, so that you had the cold weather. You could store it in the barn or in your root cellar, and it was relatively cold. But they almost always treated it with salt. And what salt does is it pulls moisture out of the meat, which makes it inhospitable for bacteria. It also helps change the protein structures. So it's a technique. Now, corning nowadays involves a different type of salt. They use a salt that's called pink salt, and it has a preservative in it called sodium nitrite. And sodium nitrite is what turns bacon pink and hot dogs pink and corned beef pink. It's a preservative, and it's quite common. And there are a lot of people who think it causes cancer, but there's been a lot of conflicting research on this, and I'm not a doctor or a scientist, but I've read enough to make me think that it may be getting falsely accused. But we don't eat that. Hopefully we don't eat hot dogs every day, and we don't eat corned beef every day. One thing, again, I don't like talking about health because I'm not a doctor, but one thing always to keep in mind when you're thinking about whether something is healthy and what you should eat or not is if you live to 80, which is, what most of us are going to make it to, you're going to eat 80,000 meals, 3 meals a day, 365, 80,000 meals. You can have a hot dog every now and then. You can have pastrami every now and then. You can have Cheetos every now and then. They're not going to kill you. So corned beef has this preservative, sodium nitrite, turns it pink, and it's got a lot of salt in it. And one of the first things you want to do is, when it comes time to cook it, you want to get as much of the fat off of it, because there's a lot of fat on and around it. You want to trim as much of the fat off of it. You want to rinse it. You don't need to use the spices and herbs that come with it, because they really can't penetrate the meat. That's an affectation. But you don't want to boil it. You want to put it in a big pot with lots of water, and you want to submerge it as best you can. And if you have to put a plate on top of it or something to keep it submerged, do that. But you want to weight it down so it's under the water and simmer it, which means 180 to 190 degrees. Boiling's 212. So you want to keep it little tiny bubbles, but you don't want a big rolling bubble, because high temperatures contract muscle fibers and it'll shrink up and it'll get really tough. So you want to keep the temperature low. And this is key. You want to change the water every hour, and you're going to boil it for 3 or 4 hours. And if you have a good digital meat thermometer, you want to get the temperature up to about 205 inside the meat. And that'll take a couple hours. So you got to change the water. And when you do, you'll notice the water is a little foamy and pink. And that's the salt coming out. Mm-hmm. And if you get some of that salt out, not all of it, you'll never get all of it out. And you don't want it all out because that really amplifies flavor. But you'll get the excess salt out, and it really makes a difference. The other thing is if you're putting potatoes and carrots and cabbage in there, you don't put them in at the beginning. They just disintegrate. So you wait till the last hour to put the potatoes and the carrots in there. They're fairly tough, and they'll need at least an hour. And then the cabbage doesn't go in until the last 30 minutes because it can really get mushy and disintegrate. So if you change the water a couple of times, keep the temperature down, don't put the carrots in until the last hour and the cabbage the last 30 minutes, you're going to end up with just a really good corned beef and cabbage that's not too salty, that's cooked properly, that's not too tough, and the vegetables, the potatoes, the carrots, and the cabbage are just delicious.
Now, you talked about changing the water each hour. Do you need to watch the temperature of the water you're putting back in? Do you need to be mindful of that?
Well, if you put cold water back in, and it's going to take time to bring it up to temp, it won't affect the quality of the food. But yeah, I would start with hot water. Get it, as hot as your sink can get. Or if you want to start a pot simmering on the side, that might be ideal. But it'll get back up to a simmer fairly quickly, and just keep it down around the simmer. That's a good question. Nobody's ever asked me that before.
I asked because I was like, well, I wanted to know myself. So,
but it's a great tradition.
Yeah.
And now here's a thought. If you want to go to the next level, corned beef is step one in making pastrami. And to make pastrami, all you need to do is take your corned beef, soak it in water for a few hours to pull some of the salt out. You just stick it in the fridge. You don't have to simmer it. Just stick it in the fridge in a pot of water and pull some of the salt out. Overnight, maybe change the water a couple of times. You'll notice the water gets pink. Then you take it and you sprinkle a spice rub on there. And I have the recipe for the classic pastrami rub on AmazingRibs.com. And it's heavy in black pepper and coriander, and it's got a little mustard powder and onion and garlic and a few other things. It's not hard. You should have everything you need in your pantry now. And if not, you'll find it at the grocery. And you cover it fairly heavily with this pastrami rub. And then you either grill it at a low temperature, or if you have a smoker, or you can set up your grill so it can smoke. You smoke it, and you smoke it for a couple of hours until you get a really nice dark bark on it. Then you wrap it in aluminum foil, and you can bring it in now and pop it in the oven, and then you continue to heat it at a fairly low temperature until it comes up to about 205 internal temperature on the meat. And it's really tender. It goes wooba, wooba, wooba when you poke it. And it is just, I think it's the ultimate version of brisket. And that's what corned beef is normally made from, is brisket. And I know anybody who's a barbecue aficionado out there in Oklahoma, Texas, brisket is king. But I got to tell you, in my world, pastrami is the ultimate brisket. And this technique, and I describe it in more detail on AmazingRibs.com, but it's really simple. Just soak the corned beef, pull out a little extra salt, make the rub, smoke it, at a low temp, wrap it in foil, bring it up to 205, and it is just bloody awesome.
Now, you talked about the salt that's in the corned beef and in the pastrami as well. And I know we've talked a little bit about salt before, but in seasoning, I know salt is a staple. Do you put it on? Do you put it on while you're cooking every time you cook?
Salt is, and I know a lot of people think salt is dangerous. And again, we keep skirting these health issues that I try to avoid. But your body needs salt. Your body requires salt. Your nervous system operates on salt. All your bodily fluids, your saliva, your blood, your tears, semen, they're all salty. And you don't manufacture salt in your body. You only get salt by consuming it. So you must eat salt. Now, the question is how much is too much? And a lot of doctors ask patients, specifically heart patients, to watch their salt intake. And again, there's more research now that says that, maybe we're a little too nervous about salt. You listen to your doctor, not me. But salt really is an important ingredient in almost all cooking. One of the things that salt does is it amplifies flavor. It turns the dial up to 11. It also helps hold on to moisture. It helps the proteins in the meat retain their moisture. The key is not to get too heavy on it. And the problem that we have with it is if you're one of these people who's too busy to cook and you eat out a lot, then you're probably at risk of getting too much salt in your diet, because restaurants, particularly fast food restaurants, know they can amplify flavor with salt, and they heavily salt things. So if you look at the measurements of sodium in things like chicken nuggets, French fries, they're a pretty good dose there. So, but if you cook for yourself, you can regulate the amount of salt and you can keep it down. But in things like corned beef and any preserved meats like corned beef, bacon, pastrami, the Canadian bacon, ham, they're all preserved with salt, and they're loaded with it. And it really is a good technique to soak it to pull some of the excess out. It's easier on the palate. I mean, you eat too much of a cured ham, and you're drinking a gallon of water before bed, and then you're up at 2 a.m, and then you're up at 3 a.m. So get some of that salt out.
Now, whenever you're getting ready to say marinate or get the meat ready for to cook, to put the seasonings on there as well, do you put salt on then, or do you wait till later? Does it dry it out? Is one of those things.
That's a really good question. Salt is unique in your spice cabinet. It's 2 atoms, and we've talked about this before, but it's worth repeating because a lot of people don't know about this. It's just sodium and chloride, 2 atoms. And when they get wet, and meat is 75% water, when they get wet on the surface of meat, they get an electrical charge. It's called ionization. And they can penetrate deep into meat. And that's where they do their magic on the proteins. And they help the proteins denature and hold on to moisture. And they also amplify flavor without altering it. Garlic and black pepper amplify but alter the flavor. They change it. But those things, they're too large a molecule to penetrate. They can get into the little tiny cracks and crevices and pores on the surface, but they can't go more than, say, 1/16 of an inch into those cracks and crevices. Sugar, for example, is 23 atoms. Salt is just 2. So, I mean, and that's a very basic form of sugar, is 23 atoms. So it just can't penetrate deep. And you think about that. You get your Thanksgiving turkey or a chicken breast that you marinate overnight. And the flavor is strong on the surface. But if you taste the center of it, that flavor is not in the center.
Right.
It's not there unless you've pushed it in there with your knife or you've mopped it around on your plate. If you take a turkey breast or a chicken breast and you marinate it overnight in the strongest flavorings you can think of, and you cook it up, and then you take a core sample, you're not going to taste anything in there except turkey or chicken, because the seasonings just can't get in. So salt is a really important ingredient. And if you ever watch these cooking shows on TV, they often criticize the competitors that you've under-seasoned it, which is chef talk for you didn't use enough salt. They talk about seasoning. When we talk about seasoning, we're talking about all kinds of spices and herbs. They're talking about salt.
That's right. Now, speaking of seasonings and rubs and all that, I know that your rubs and seasoning and also the barbecue sauce is available now. And tell us what it's like to get the feedback since it's been available to the general public.
Well, we just, I've been hanging around the barbecue world a long time, and I have never made commercial rubs and sauces because we give recipes for them on AmazingRibs.com. But a lot of people say, I just don't have the time. I'm too lazy. I make up a whole batch of a rub and it sits around for a year, and spices and herbs lose their oomph after months. Why don't you bottle this stuff? And I have never done it because I just did, any good barbecue joint has a good barbecue sauce and they bottle it. Why do I want to compete with your neighborhood barbecue joint and Sweet Baby Ray? But I visited a spice factory, Old World Spices in Kansas City, a couple of years ago. And they came to me and they said, you're so well known that if you brought out some rubs and spices, they'd really sell well. And I'm thinking, oh, my daddy taught me, don't ever leave money on the table. So we went about it and we really worked hard. And we came up with 3 rub recipes, a pork, a poultry, and a red meat rub, and a barbecue sauce. And they came on the market in November. And your samples are on their way. And right now, they're only available through our website. And that's because it just takes time for things to get into grocery store, wholesale chain, and hardware stores. They should be showing up in the hardware stores, Ace and Lowe's and Home Depot, sometime in spring. It just takes time for that all to happen. But you can order them through our website, through AmazingRibs.com. They're pretty good. We work really hard on them. They've got some really nice ingredients in them. And, I'm getting a huge feedback on the poultry seasoning. People really love that. And the red meat rub, I'll tell you, all my life, I slapped the wrist of anybody who put anything but salt and pepper on a steak. And this red meat rub, I won't cook a steak without it. My wife won't let me cook a steak without it. Right. It's really awesome. So you try some, see what you think. We're really proud of them, and they should be finding their way into the marketplace. But in the meantime, you can get them from AmazingRibs.com.
Now, how many revisions did you have to make before you finally got each of the rubs?
The rubs took it. All 3 of the rubs took 3 revisions. That was, we sent them the recipe. They sent us back a sample. We send it back with some corrections and changes. They sent it back and more corrections and changes. And it took 3 changes of each. The sauce took 4 iterations to get down pat. And there's a secret ingredient in there. And if you can guess it, it's really the secret ingredient, I think, really puts it over the top. And it's a natural ingredient. It's nothing weird or anything, but it's a flavor that really is nice in a barbecue sauce. We have a 4th rub coming out, a pastrami rub, but it's not out yet. Pastrami is having a moment, I think, on the internet. We published our first recipe 10 years ago, and a lot of bloggers and websites are now, because it's easy to it's easy to go down. Hey, corned beef goes on sale in March, and it freezes well. Go to your grocer and load up on corned beef. Just don't buy what you need for St. Patrick's Day. Load up on corned beef while it's on sale. Throw it in your freezer. It'll freeze. It'll keep really well because it's got a preservative in it. And save it for all through spring and summer, and pull that stuff out and turn it into pastrami. Hey, a Reuben sandwich is typically made with corned beef. You make a roommate sandwich with pastrami and you'll never go back. And yeah, the pastrami is just awesome. And maybe by then we'll have our pastrami rub on the market.
Now, as we get closer to spring and warmer weather, how often have you been getting out on the balcony still grilling?
Yeah, I have a deck out back. And it's on the verge of collapse. There's so much iron on there. In fact, the boss passed down a bitter dictum to me not long ago. She said, anything comes in, something's got to go out. Otherwise, you're sleeping on the couch. Nothing stops me. I was raised in Central Florida, and but I still go out there in my shirt sleeves all through winter, and it's been cold up here. It's been down in the teens, but I mean, things just taste better on the grill. That the flame and smoke just really amplify flavor, and it's a pheromone. It's great. It's great stuff. So nothing stops me.
Well, I tell you, we haven't talked a whole lot since our last visit, but we've had some changes in life, and I have actually come across a couple of new grilling and like smoking things that we can use to do some of that. And I think I'm going to hit you up to give us some little tips on those in the months to come. So
you're telling me, I think in code,
one of those egg. You
got an egg?
I got one of a red egg smoker right over here that my father-in-law brought with him. And so I want to talk a little bit about that in a coming episode, and then just some other grilling ideas too.
Absolutely. Let's do a session coming up. I mean, I was coming on every month, but life got in the way the last 2 months. I think I had some issues that kept me from you, and then you had some issues that kept you from me. Thank goodness we're well and we're healthy, and nothing life-threatening, but we're back on the beam, you and I, and hopefully we'll be continuing to talk every month. And let's do one soon on cooking on those eggs, or the Kamados, they're called.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're a very specialized and very, very excellent cooking tool that has some real strengths and some real weaknesses. So we'll talk about what they do well and what they don't do well, and what I love and what I hate about them.
That sounds like a plan. Well, Meathead, always want to make sure and let folks know where they can find more information about the rubs, the sauces, all the recipes we talk about, and of course, the book itself.
Yeah, the website's AmazingRibs.com, and the tips and the recipes for corned beef and cabbage, or what is often called New England boiled dinner or jigs, is on AmazingRibs.com. Also, there's recipe for corned beef hash and another number of corned beef variations, and pastrami, all on AmazingRibs.com. And also for a really good background education on the concepts of grilling and smoking, the science of grilling and smoking, my book Meathead is a pretty good reference. It's the #1 best-selling barbecue book in the market right now.
That's good stuff, and for good reason. I will say that as well.
Thank you.
Well, Meathead, it has been great to catch back up with you today, brother. Hopefully the intermittency is behind us now.
Yeah, I missed you. It's always good. It sounds like I'm sucking up to you, but you love food, you love cooking, and you always ask great questions, and it's always fun to talk to you. And you give me enough time to get into a subject. I talked to a couple of radio folks, and I got like 6 minutes, and you really can't get far into a topic. So I just really enjoy my time with you, and we've been doing this now for several years. It's fun.
That's good. That's good. Well, Meathead, have a great rest of your February, and look forward to talking again next month, brother.
And good talking to you.